Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk to you this evening about a particular life skill. This is not a gaming thing, but this happens in the gaming scene. This is a skill that's very difficult to do, and some people have no idea how to do it. But it's crucial to how we interact with each other because humans make mistakes. And you might be like, what is this? What is this? I'm talking about how to apologize. In the general sense, where you interact with other people, someone makes a mistake and owes another person an apology. We're going to use the amazing computer program known as NS Paint, Microsoft Paint, and we're going to talk about the elements to it. Let's just do apologizing 101 for noobs. All right. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this was because lately I have been experiencing a bunch of non-apologies or blame shifting for stuff, not necessarily involving me, but sometimes involving me, where someone makes a mistake and then they either fail to apologize for one, they give an apology that's too weak for two, or they just blame shift and double down on whatever their stance was. So I wanted to just go through some of the basics here. So let's just break down an example that gives you some visual information. Let's say that you have a person, and this person, they might be a decent person. They might not be a bad person, but they made a mistake. And let's say their mistake was about this size. Let's just fill this in with green. A star. Wow. It's a green star of their nasty mistake. Let's let the green represent something gross, like slime. One thing that some people will do is they'll put this mistake out in some social situation. They make a mistake in a group or a mistake with a person, and that sticker is just on that person they made a mistake with until they do something about it. And one of the best things that you can do about it is you can apologize for what you did. Now, I'm going to show you a couple things that some people do that would not fix this issue. And I'll do a beautiful illustration here for you. Let's say the red, these colors are not fitting with this situation at all. Let's do red. Red is more of a bad color, mistake color. Green is usually money or something like trees, which is usually good. So we're doing a red star for the mistake. We changed. Redo the video. They made this big of a mistake, and it should be kind of ugly too. Let's just do a brush to like make it kind of fucked up. Yeah, that's fucked up now. Right. They made this size of a mistake. And they made this mess on the floor in someone's life. Sometimes they'll just say, no, that wasn't even a mess, and they'll just refuse to admit that they even made a mistake. For one, that's obnoxious, because if you're just the kind of person who can never be wrong about things ever, it's unrealistic and everyone's going to figure that out. Why are people going to figure that out? Because no one is right all the time. So let's list some facts here too, just so we keep our facts straight. We have our facts section here. Let's do this. Facts. Number one. I'll do a smaller font so we don't take up this whole area. Okay. Number one fact. Nobody is perfect. What does that mean? Nobody is perfect. It means that nobody can take the proper course. Nobody can be perfectly attentive of everyone's opinions and stances and behaviors. No one can be aware of all the different elements in a situation. And sometimes you're going to offend people. Sometimes you're going to say something that's out of line. And that's life. So fact number one is you have to accept that nobody's perfect, which also includes fact 1A. How do you do 1A like this? You are imperfect because you're a person, and that includes you. Some people, they want to be in this stance where they can never be wrong about everything, and that's just nasty because you are going to be wrong, and when you are wrong and other people see it, it just makes you out to be an ass. What's another fact here? Mistakes can be recovered from. We'll say recovered or atoned from. So some mistakes are greater than others. That's another fact. Let's just list that off too. Mistakes can be at different levels. So for an example here, for this point number 3, you could have a smaller mistake. Let's just do a little mistake here. Oh my goodness, this was a little mistake. Let's say this was just kind of mouthing off at some random person because you're mad about your day. If you made this mistake, the apology that you make should be proportionate to the size of the mistake. Let's say this one is like yelling, getting really mad, throwing stuff, and threatening people. This is a huge mistake and is hyper aggressive, and people are scared and they're going to not trust you in the future. So if you're thinking about apologies and the completeness of an apology, the size of the apology and the commitment to change for this situation should be much greater than this one, which might be, oh, I just bumped into someone and I kind of knocked their groceries over. It's a mistake and you should apologize for it for sure, but your recovery for it is going to be easier relatively than this one here of doing something super nasty. Let's say we have a rectangle or a circle of apologizing. You can apologize, cover your bases, and then it's cool. And you're cool with that person. But what if you do a weak apology for a big situation like this? Like you throw stuff. You're in the house and you're mad at someone and you're throwing books on the ground. You're punching the wall and you're yelling at them and you're screaming and threatening and stuff. And then at the end of that conversation, you say, I'm so sorry. But that's all you say. That's like doing this. Where you technically did apologize to an extent, but your apology doesn't even cover half of what you did wrong. And that's going to keep you in the negative still with that person. A lot of people, they don't even grasp this as a concept. They think that sorry is like a get out of jail free card. You stole a vehicle and you ran over a bunch of stuff and destroyed property and maybe hurt someone. You can't just say you're sorry and then be out of that. Which brings me to maybe the most important thing is how to apologize. How do you do that? Let's get the text again. How do you even do that? All right. Point number 1 is to identify and admit what exactly you did wrong. Notice that point number 1 here is above and beyond just saying that you're sorry, because you also articulate what you did wrong and you admit it. You say to the person that I did the wrong thing. What I did in that situation was bad. I should not have thrown stuff. I should not have raised my voice at you. If I had a concern with you, I should think about what that is and be able to articulate that like a well-balanced and rational person so that you don't feel unsafe. As an example, identify and admit it. What's a side note about this? This step feels bad. This step feels bad. It feels really bad. Why? Because being the bad guy or bad girl or whatever in a situation, it's not the high ground. You are admitting that you had the low ground in that situation and you were not being good to someone else, which is tough to do. It's really tough to do. You have to dig deep to do this. It's not a fun thing. What's fun? Being right is fun. Being the person who ended up being the hero in the end, that's fun. But if you go to fact 1 and 1A, everyone makes mistakes, which means sometimes you will need to apologize to someone for what you did. Think about it. So you need to be able to identify and admit what exactly you did wrong. Why is it not fitting the Y? Here we go. So you identify these things. 2, think about how it was hurtful or harmful to the other person. We'll put an S here in case it's multiple people. You should be able to think about that. Not just identifying it in their words, but you think about it in your own words of how did I actually deal damage in this situation? And think about it from their perspective too, because not everyone has the same weak points. I'll give you a personal example for myself. My best friend through university, he was an amazing, brilliant guy, and he passed away several years ago. And he passed away by suicide, right? So when someone is hanging out in my stream and they're making jokes about killing themselves and stuff, it's unfunny to me. And honestly, it's a little bit upsetting to me to be flippant about something that actually takes human life. It's really sad. And I love my friend and I wish he was still here. So if you make a suicide joke in a room where nobody has a close friend who died that way, everyone might laugh and maybe it's funny and it doesn't hurt anybody. But if you say that around someone who does have a close friend where that happened, it could be really hurtful. So what that means is you need to be prepared to respect different people's preferences, different people's boundaries, and different people's wishes. You should be flexible in that sense. So maybe you don't have a memory you can compare it to and say, oh yeah, I remember also my friend, that was really bad, so I shouldn't have said that. Maybe you don't even know what that pain is like. So you need to think about it from their perspective. So this step is really important. I need to think about why this was hurtful to the other person based on their experience. Super important step. Number 3 would be to articulate how you can do better next time. This one is pretty tricky because it involves knowing how you need to change your behavior. And that's complicated. And it's a lot more detailed and it requires a lot more effort than just saying I'm sorry. If you just bumped into someone on the train and you say I'm sorry, you're pretty good. Like, that's fine. Bumping into people happens, they're not injured, and they'll be fine. But if you really hurt someone's feelings, or if you really deal damage to someone in some way, you should have like a real major apology. If you really offend someone, if you really make them feel unsafe or scared or hurt or betrayed or something like that, you need to make a complete apology, which involves step 3. Articulate how you can do better next time and generally moving forward. I'll give you some examples from my guild leadership and with community leadership in the Neuro community. Sometimes there's a person who says some really upsetting stuff and majorly hurts people's feelings. It drives them away from the community because they feel like the community is not safe or the guild is not safe. If you need to apologize and you want to abide in that space, you need to do step number 3. It is absolutely crucial that you do step number 3 because otherwise you're going to make the same mistake in the future again if you're not mindful of that. So say, for example, if you're being hyper aggressive with people in conversations and making them feel uncomfortable and unsafe, and you're being kind of scary and disregarding number 1 and 1A, you just never admit that you're wrong. You have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to think about my behavior and I'm going to think about why other people are uncomfortable, and I'm going to open myself to the option of doing things a little bit differently, of being able to say, hey, if someone tells me to stop or they set a boundary somewhere, I'm just going to respect that boundary and I'm going to go with the flow of what the group is asking me to do, because that's how you get along with people and how you build positive reputation. There's a fun parallel between building reputations with factions in classic WoW, or really in many video games, where you've got a bunch of different bars and it says this is your reputation with the Bloodsail Buccaneers, this is your reputation with Ogremar, this is your reputation with the Frost Dragons or whatever factions are in the game. And if you do good things for the frost dragons, your reputation goes up from being neutral to friendly, and then from being friendly to honored, and then from honored to revered, and revered to exalted. You can think about relationships with people the same way, where every time you do something good for someone else, even if they don't give you money, even if they don't give you gold or some currency in game, or say thank you or whatever, oftentimes you are building reputation with these people. Say someone says, hey, can you help me out with this? And you help them out with that. You save them time by helping them out. That gives you reputation much of the time. Not everyone is equally grateful for help like that, but it is definitely something to consider. What about the flip side? If you say something mean to someone, or really kind of snarky and dismissive, they might not go off on you and like get into an argument and call you out, but you may have just lost 10 reputation, 15 reputation when you do stuff like that. It's not as though every conversation begins from the 0 point. People remember stuff that you do and stuff that you say. And if you say a bunch of funny, good, helpful stuff and you're a force of compassion and kindness around them, that's great. And maybe they don't give you money for that, but that makes you a good friend. And you go from being friendly to maybe they're honored to have you around because you're such a pleasant person to be around. And if you make a mistake and you lose some reputation, you're still friendly because you've built up so much reputation over time. So you can assess this for yourself. You can assess, what is my reputation with this group? And obviously it's going to be a guess of some kind. We don't actually write down numbers of what our reputation is with our friends and our groups and so on. But you can get a rough sense of it based on how things have gone so far. So be mindful of that. And if your reputation is pretty low or you're getting in trouble, that's okay. That's a position that you have to work from. If you want to get into better standing, you have to behave in such a way that your reputation goes up. And a key step in that process is if your reputation goes down by making a mistake, you apologize. You identify and admit, hey, what I did was wrong. I'm thinking about, okay, this is why other people might not like this. Maybe I'm fine with it, and if someone did that to me, I wouldn't care. But if I'm doing this in a space where other people are hurt, I should stop. And I should also articulate how I can do better next time and generally moving forward. And then another one would be, what's another step for apologizing? Be aware of your own tendencies towards similar mistakes. This, I would say, is looking at your own personality. Because some people have habits, right? This is referring to habits that you've developed over many, many years. If you make a mistake and it crosses a line, but you've made that mistake or you've done that behavior many, many times around other people, your natural reaction is to just keep doing that, because inertia is a very powerful thing, and behavior has its own sort of inertia, where we tend to behave in similar ways that we have in the past. That's why change, from a social and psychological standpoint, happens at more of a glacial pace rather than a rapid pace. It's not as though a person can go from being really kind of argumentative and combative to just being fully passive and like the gentlest person ever. You would be, say, taking yourself from, let's just draw it out here. We'll do a little scale. Let's get a line. Yeah. Let's make it this color. Yeah. Get another one. Another one. It's not the best line, but it's the line we got. You've got different kinds of personalities that you could have. Let's say this one is how talkative you are, and this one is how aggressive you are. The further to the right, actually that doesn't make sense. Let's say this axis is basically how quick you are to anger, and this one is how often you interact socially. People process their emotions differently. So if we're looking at someone who's maybe very angry and very talkative, we'll put them up here. Very angry and very talkative. They like to get in fights. a person who's here on the spectrum is going to clash the most and hurt people the most who are here. They're not very talkative and they're not very aggressive either. So they're basically communicating in different ways. You may know lots of people in your life who are pretty argumentative, and that's fun for them. They like to argue. So someone who's here maybe, they're happy. They're happy to box. They like to have these kind of debates and discussions, and it gets heated and that kind of thing. So they're happy up here. They're not going to agree on everything, but they communicate in the same way. If this person is yelling at this person, they just want to hide in a hole and get away from the situation. So you need to think about, what is my personality and who am I talking to? Because if you're talking to someone who's down here and you're fucking shouting at them like this, you're going to scare the shit out of them, right? And then if we're looking down here, the downside of having this personality is sometimes you'll be carrying some burdens and have some pain in your life that you just can't really muster the energy to tell these people that, hey, that's hurtful. You just kind of quietly bear the pain of your personality here because you don't want to upset someone else and you don't like confrontation. So think about the different personality archetypes that are in play as well for the situation that you're in. Because people, if you're thinking about communicating as well as you can, you need to communicate a little bit differently to fit the person that you're talking to. There's a fun mantra, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When you're in a conversation, think about, who am I talking to? What kind of person are they? How does communication work for them? And how can I speak to them kind of in their own terms, on their level, in a way that is harmonious to the two of us? So this is a pretty intense experience to go through. And I would say that apologizing, you could describe it as its own skill. It's basically a communication skill and it's a behavioral skill, because you've got the communication of being able to articulate why you messed up, but then you've got the self-control of being able to initiate change in your own life. So we're talking about not just the I'm sorry, because that's going to be kind of this situation where it's too weak of an apology for the size of the mistake that you made. You need to completely cover it. And let's go back to this example here. If you really scared someone, you would need to not just say you're sorry, you would need to spend, let's get the paintbrush here. You would need to spend a month treating that person well. And then you would need to spend another month treating that person well and not blowing up at them and scaring them. And then you would need to spend another month doing that. And you can gradually chip away at such a thing to demonstrate to them that you are actually willing to change. But the change that you do takes a whole bunch of effort over time. A lot of effort. And it's tedious because you can't just fix it all in one step. You need to prove to them that you're willing day by day to communicate to them in a better way that you have in the past, to respect the rules of the house, the rules of the road, the rules of your guild, whatever community or company that you're in that has rules. And you need to really work away at this so that over a great deal of time, you can completely recover from it potentially. If you're really good and you control yourself, you know what you did wrong, you know what your tendencies are with your personality, and you're prepared to do the long form work of really improving your situation because people remembered the shit that you did that was wrong. Do you want to know a secret? Psychologically speaking, our brain tends to remember stuff that was pretty traumatic or really emotionally salient, more so than just random facts about our day. Which means that if you really made a big mistake, people are going to heckin' remember that way more than they're going to remember what they had for lunch last Thursday. I'll tell you that. And that's why apologizing completely and changing your behavior over time is so fucking important. It's super important. I'm continuing to do this because it's still, you can still see the spots here. Day by day, you're still working at it. You're still working at it. And you can get to a point like this where you've mostly covered it, but it's not perfect. And that's okay too, because nobody's perfect. But they could see that you put forth a lot of this effort. and they can respect that effort. Do you have any thoughts or tips about apologizing and being kind to other people? Because it's pretty hard to do, TBH, and it feels pretty bad. If you want to know some fun trivia about me, I've made mistakes too. And it feels really bad, especially when it's a big mistake. I'll tell you one that comes to mind that I had a direct hand in. There was a really nice warrior in our guild who he was next up in our loot system for a particular belt. It's called Onslaught Girdle, and it was the best belt for DPS warriors for pretty much the whole game. And I didn't remember that we had this particular spreadsheet and system, and I was called in to basically figure out who this belt should go to, because it's really strong. And we had another warrior in the guild who was also a really good player, really nice person, and they're good at their class. If we gave the belt to this person, they would get full use out of it, and it would be great. And just kind of not thinking everything through, I said, well, why don't we give it to this person? Because they're really good, and they haven't had a big item in a bit. And the other people in the loot discussion said, oh yeah, sure, let's give it to them. So we did. And the person who was up next for it in the sheet, they didn't say anything right away. So the other person equipped it, which means we can't change it back. But then later on, they said that they were really upset by that because they work really hard for the guild, and the system said that they were next. And I had a direct hand in that situation, and I made a mistake. It was just a lack of attention. I should have checked the spreadsheet that said this person gets it next. But did I do that? No, I did not do that. People forget stuff. So what did I do? I did what was referred to as get out in front of the mistake, because nobody wants to apologize, right? It's really scary because you don't like admitting that you were wrong. So I said, okay, well, I'm just going to write up a full apology. So what did I do? I made a guild message and I said, hey, I wanted to apologize for how this situation was handled. I articulated that it should have gone to that person. It went to the wrong person. And I talked about how that person has worked really hard for the guild and they definitely deserve the belt. And then I said that we had the sheet system set up and we should have checked the sheet. We should have double checked it and made sure that it was correct before awarding the item to the right person. And we should be more diligent about that in the future. And it still felt bad. Like, I made the post, and at the end of it, I still felt bad because I know that I couldn't fix it just with one write-up of an apology. You still have step 4, and you have the effort moving forward of doing things right ahead of you. So it's a kind of closing thought here for apologizing. Just because you apologize for a mistake that you made doesn't mean that you're instantly going to feel better either. You may feel bad for some time, and that's okay. That's part of your brain telling your body with emotion that this is something that I don't want to have happen again, because we don't like feeling bad. So if you feel bad that you made a mistake and you apologize and you still feel bad, that's okay. That's normal and that's natural, and that's part of just prioritizing not making the mistake moving forward. For some fun stuff, to wrap it up, what are some common things that people do that are not apologies, but they think they're apologies? We had a fun one today that actually was kind of the spark that got the conversation going. This was a good one. Sorry, I guess. That was a good one. That the I guess basically weakens the sorry, which was already weak to begin with, so I would call this a non-apology. What's another one? Sorry you feel that way, which is basically saying that you're sorry that they're so emotionally weak that they would be hurt by something like that, which is basically blame shifting and also counts as a non-apology. Do you have any other fun ones? Any non-apologies that you've seen? Another one is having a B2 general. I made a big mistake, but not really articulating what that was. or how you're going to do things different. I would call that an incomplete apology, where you understand that the magnitude was great, but you didn't really focus on what that was or how to fix it. So it gets the apology off the ground a little bit, but it doesn't actually finish the job. Well, there's a good one in the chat. Apologizing and then justifying it. I'm sorry, but... I'm sorry, but. So the but and then whatever follows that basically negates any of the momentum you had toward actually apologizing. We got another good one in the chat. I didn't mean to. Which is sort of trying to deflect a little bit of the responsibility. Whoops. Whoops and my bad, I would say, are weak apologies that can work in certain situations. Like if you dropped something. But I don't do that now. Yeah. Be wary of these two, because a lot of people, they do these as a quick reaction, but they don't really think about the implications of they actually didn't cover the size of the mistake that they made with this, and the person could get more upset if you give them a weak apology or a non-apology. This isn't who I am. Ooh, that one is nasty. I agree. That's a really good non-apology. This isn't who I am. Motherfucker, that is exactly who you are because you're the fucking perpetrator of said behavior. Jeez Louise. How are you even supposed to respond to these offenders? That's a really good question. I would say it depends on your level of interest in engaging with the person and if you want to confront them on it. Because sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes people have offended you too many times that it's like, okay, their reputation is too far in the negative. I'm just not going to waste my time. If you think there's hope for the person and you want to try to shift it, you could say, hey, that's not actually an apology. Like, you can't just say that and then expect people to move on. And then articulate some of this stuff of they need to be able to identify what you did wrong. And they should be able to put it in their own words. We learned how to do this in school, which is they have you read something, but then they want you to put it in your own words. You can't just copy what the other person said or copy paste what was directly in the book. You need to use your own language to prove that you have figured out what the problem was. That's a huge step. Another non-apology, if you feel offended, I apologize. That's so nasty. If you feel offended, that once again is basically pointing to the other person's feelings as the source of the problem. Another one is, you shouldn't feel offended by X. This is a pretty common one where people will basically point to the other person and say that they're too sensitive. Too sensitive, it depends on, like I was saying before, your personal areas of vulnerability. A lot of people will talk mad shit to other people, but they're not infinitely robust against shit talking as well. If someone is genuinely tearing at their character and talking crap about them, they get really defensive and they get upset because it doesn't feel good when other people are shit talking you. Newsflash. So you should be able to identify that as well. That the behavior that you're doing, if it was sent toward me, or if they took a different attack angle, I would also be hurt. Everybody can be offended. Everyone can be hurt. It's not your job as the judge to decide what they should or should not be offended about. That's silly. That one is very gaslighty, yeah. Well, this basically covers what I wanted to address about apologizing for noobs. And we're all people who can get better at this. I'm not a perfect person. I've made mistakes too. And I've probably done some stuff and maybe not apologized 100% of the way. Because communication is one of the most complex and difficult things that we have to do in life. And it's okay to be kind of a noob at this. Maybe you weren't taught how to do this. Maybe you didn't have a good example set for you by your parents and teachers and people growing up. I would say that's not your fault. It's not your fault if you didn't have good role models and that kind of a thing, but you are responsible for your behavior. So your mistakes that you make they still count as mistakes, even if you didn't get that good role model. So change has to happen with yourself, and you're the only person who can change your behavior. This is a small opportunity to learn how to apologize. Maybe you have some different opinions upon it. You can share those in the comments if you want, or in chat. It's a good discussion to have, and it's a super important discussion because it applies to all of our interaction, not just one particular video game. Thank you. And if you're really sorry about something, you should put forth the effort to make sure that is fully known to the other person and dedicate yourself to doing better.